Supposed to be on your knee yet? Or not? I know where you're from, so I know you're good with some toughness. Yeah, I can start. Thank you all very much for being here in what has been a great off-season heading into practice, and excited to talk about this year's team with you. Dating back to last spring, and from then until now, I could not be more excited about the progress our program has made. It certainly started with roster management, built upon retention, and I think retention gets used a lot, but the right retention, and then complemented in the transfer portal, which has brought together what I just have been amazed at how close and connected a group can be in a short amount of time, and we certainly have that here. In addition to that, we've laid a great foundation on what it means to play with great urgency and competitive spirit, and then also that chemistry that we've had off the court, and was evident right away, has been apparent between the lines as well. So still got a lot of work to do to get ready for what is, again, another tough schedule, but couldn't be more happy with the progress that's been made since the conclusion of last season. Really excited about this group. Yeah, well, I think, you got to look back at what our goals were this summer, and we wanted to get stronger. So a lot of what we did outside of the court was to build strength and lay a really firm foundation. So I anticipated our conditioning maybe not being great at the start of practice, but our guys have been better than I thought they would be. So I've loved the pace that we've been able to play at so far. We've been charting, possessions per 40 minutes based on how we've been playing, and really excited about those numbers so far. But the chemistry that I talked about has been evident, from the start of practice all the way through now. It is 6 practices, I think, or 6 or 7 practices. So it's been great, Adam. Really excited. We've been able to compete every single day, every time we're on the court, and I think that's helped speed up our growth, certainly. I think the game it's slowly starting to slow down for him. The pace that we're playing at is different. It's not what he's used to. I think it's certainly a different game that he's used to playing overseas and playing, which he played really well at the U18. But you now got older guys and you got guys with more experience on the court. So the first day of practice was really fast for him, and certainly had a chance to get acclimated. Once we started up school, but. I've been really impressed since, Monday to now, yesterday, that first Monday to yesterday, just how much he's improved in understanding what we're doing, limiting some of those turnovers he had in the first couple of days of practice and becoming more efficient. So it's really interesting because, we're viewing things through a lens of everybody who's been here since June. He was around, got to watch, but couldn't participate, and then missed stretches because he was following his national team. So sometimes I got to remind myself of that. And I've just been really impressed with the progress he's made so far. I think he's learning, figuring out where he's comfortable, and the beautiful thing about this team is he can be the best version of himself. That certainly is as a player. I think the way we're playing, he fits perfectly in the system we're trying to play this year. But also from a leadership standpoint, you have some bigger, louder voices in terms of leadership on this team. But his production is going to be important. His minutes are going to be there. And I think his leadership and how he leads is equally important because it's different than some of the other guys. So he seems really comfortable with that.
A lot of players were hyping up Amari, saying that he's a dark horse. What caught your eye about him in practice and his just evolution from day one till now?
Yeah, I love coaching Amari, and he plays the game with a joy and an eagerness to get better. That I think that level of humility and just consistency is rare for young players. And so he's certainly talented. He's got some great physical tools, but he has had not just one or two high-level, practices or moments since June, but he's had multiple, stretches of high-level basketball and productive basketball, which is, equally hard for young players to do early on. But make no mistake, you can coach him hard. You can push him. He wants to get better. He's eager to get better, and he loves the game. And it is evident every single day he's here. And I think that's really impressive and a big-time quality of a young player.
Yeah, big picture. I assume that you have two goals. You rank them. Is there a pecking order? And if so, where is the ranking against the
Yeah, well, I think you can look on the back wall and see, what the standard is, in my opinion, of where this program should be tracking towards. And I don't apologize for having big expectations, right? I've been very consistent with that from the day I got this job. Much to, the dismay of people who would say, you're setting the bar too high, or you do it like Ohio State basketball, I believe belongs as one of the best programs in the country. However, right, talking about it isn't enough. We got a lot of work to do to get there. I think, disappointed in how we finished the season last year, for sure. But we don't go into the season just wanting to do this. We're not setting a lower bar because maybe the program hasn't been there in the past. To me, the bar in this program should always be at the very top. It's hard to do. I understand that. There's a lot of factors that influence your ability to do that on a year-in, year-out basis. But across the board, we've made progress in a ton of areas. Most importantly, I think our roster. And so we're shooting for the moon, and that's kind of how we operate every single day. So our guys know that, so it's not something we have to talk about every day, right? We want to back up those standards with how we work, the consistency of our work, our competitive spirit, the toughness we're bringing them in the court. So I grew up watching Ohio State basketball that had some unbelievable stretches, and certainly, notably, my brother playing here. And I remember when that team was number one in the country. I understand we didn't do that last year. However, I'm not going to lower the bar of where I want this program to be because we didn't get the result we wanted. We're going to fight, scratch, and claw every single day to get this program back to that level. However long it takes, that's what we're doing.
You watch it?
I watched it towards the end of the tournament. I didn't watch the first couple rounds. I've gone back since and watched some games just because I think you constantly want to see things you can pick up, and there's some things schematically that we're trying to do this year that we weren't able to do last year. We tried in the preseason, we just couldn't quite get the concepts down, so we had to shift a little bit. I think we have the roster to be able to execute some of those things. So I went back and watched some tournament games to see some teams who maybe do some similar things, and just take some notes, pick up some things, and see how they can apply to us. It made me sick. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. I think disappointed certainly, and the wound was fresh. I think again, when you reference last year, it's instantly a reminder of, we got to get this thing back to where it belongs, and that's what we're working towards every day. He does seem different. I wish you guys could watch his first week of practices. He's been unbelievable. And there seems to be he seems to be playing just lighter, I guess, in a figurative way. He's got a joy to him. He's competing at such a high level. He's even talking a little trash at times. He seems laser focused on this team getting better each and every day, him taking ownership over, as a leader. But it seems very easy for him now to block out any kind of peripheral stuff and just focus on getting better. It's been really impressive. He's played at a really high level so far. Well, I think he still, and he and I talked, like, we're not just satisfied with how he did personally last year, right? We both have big goals for this team, but even for him personally, continuing to raise his level and finding a way to get, I mean, he was an unbelievable player last year. There's no doubt, but he wasn't perfect. He still got room to grow in some areas. So we've really attacked those in his individual work. But you know, if Bruce Thornton can be just a little bit better, that obviously is going to be great for Ohio State basketball. I do think it could look a little different. I think, you know, because of this roster, because of the way we're going to be able to play, it's going to open up some different opportunities for him. And you know, we got more playmaking this year than we had last year, which can take some of the load off of him and maybe, you know, find some ways, which we did towards the end of last season with Junior, but we have other guys too who can find some ways to give Bruce an easier basket that he doesn't just have to create for himself, you know, in such a difficult way. I think without question, it's this team, you know, is significantly deeper than last year. The experience of this team compared to last year is it's been impactful already. And you know, we went into this offseason, you know, it was important for us to play with more pace and more versatility and less called sets, more free-flowing concepts. It was important to raise our collective basketball IQ. I think certainly experience helps with that, right? We lacked, you know, when you look at the top part of our rotation, or the main part of our rotation last year, we lacked experience. Even our sophomores last year didn't have, you know, the type of experience that, you know, as freshmen that Judy Mobley had as a freshman last year. So experience helps with that, and then we targeted specific, you know, I think, call it basketball characteristics in the portal to complement the guys that we had and also fit the way we want to play. So I feel like we're able to be, this team's able to be more like what we want to be as a program moving forward. And, you know, I really appreciate, I think the fight, the stick together, scratch and claw all the way to the end of the season mentality that our team had last year, considering all the adversity we faced. But every year you get a chance to kind of adapt and change your roster. I feel like we did a really good job with that.
You probably touched on some of this answers to the other question. The question I get a lot with this is why are they going to do better than last year? Talk about guys and stuff, but maybe deeper than that. Why is this team better equipped to win games if they can and maybe end up, like you said, some of those things?
Listen, I think if you really dive into the analytics of last year's team, there were some clear deficiencies that we had. I think first and foremost, it started with rebounding. On both sides of the ball. We were one of the worst teams in the Big Ten at second chance points per game, and then we were one of the worst teams in the Big Ten at defensive rebound percentage. So immediately, part of that certainly was a size issue for us last year. We went into the season thinking we were going to play a certain way, dealt with some stuff, right, that interrupted that, and then we had to pivot as best we could throughout the season as we faced, you know, roster attrition from one or two guys being out to guys being out for significant stretches and so on and so forth. So we wanted to certainly be able to play bigger. Part of that was moving Devin Royal more to the perimeter. And, you know, I know a lot of people thought I was crazy for that, and that's fine, but I think it fits exactly what we want to do. I think he's done a great job with it. It works well with the guys we brought in the portal and Brandon and Kristoff. And so, you know, we're bigger across the board. You know, last year we were going into a lot of Big Ten games, 6'6" and 6'8", right, at the 4-5, with two guards who, you know, Bruce plays a lot bigger than he is, but two guards who are under, you know, 6'3". This year, when you look at the lineups we can put on the floor, it's just significantly bigger. It's not only taller, but it's more physical. So I think simply through some of the roster changes we made, we've begun to address the rebounding things. And we're going to adjust some schemes as well, particularly going to the offensive glass. That'll help us with that too. Now, right, it's one thing right on paper, it's another thing to go out and do it. But I think we've got some proven rebounders throughout the career. We've got some guys who, you know, can really help us be better in those areas. That was a big issue for us. Another issue for us was our free throw rate of our opponents. We were the worst in the league at sending people to the free throw line. I think a big part of that was inexperience. You don't fully understand and appreciate how valuable experience is until you maybe don't have it. And there were simple things where maybe you're a half step late just because you haven't seen that stuff for 2-3 years in a college career, and that mattered. And then, I think there were also times where just we struggled transferring what we worked on to game time, right? Because in this league, you have to be able to change in the flow of the game. You can't change who you are, but you've got to be able to adjust. We struggled at times to do that, and I think again, fouling resulted in that. Like, for us to have the defense we had last year and be so poor at rebounding and fouling too much, like it says that what we were doing wasn't broken. We didn't finish possessions as well as we need to. So it's been a huge thing for us. We've talked about with our players and certainly amongst our staff, we own those margins that we can be better. I mean, when you look at the end of the season, just how close we were by all accounts, probably one game, right? One right game away of playing in the NCAA tournament. Those margins, that's the difference. So we've really tried to attack those. There's other things too. We've certainly dove into this head, but I think another thing for us was assist rate. And that was another thing for us where, we had an efficient offense, and quite honestly, we had to call, significantly more set actions than I would prefer to, but that's what fit that team as the year went on. This team is really gifted at playing off of each other, reading situations, and so our assist rate in practice has been a major improvement. Major improvement. We'll see how that translates when you see, but right now we know what's coming as a defense, and we're still, a lot of our field goals are assisted. So I think those three areas in particular have all been improvements. Now we just obviously need to carry that over into game time.
What about you? Obviously, first year as a head coach, I'm sure you had expectations going in. What did you learn about the profession, yourself, the team, kind of all of that maybe you didn't know when you sat here?
Yeah, well, I think, when you consider the whole picture of last year, it was like getting a doctorate in coaching. When I went into the start of the season, you anticipate things changing, you anticipate adversity, but I don't think anybody could have anticipated all the stuff we dealt with. And then on top of that, 11 out of our 32 games or whatever, 33 games were decided by 2 possessions or less. So, yeah, I'm not afraid to stand up here and say I'm a better coach now than I was this time last year. I think that's part of it. But I also think there's little things behind the scenes, understanding, where my time is best spent throughout the course of the day. And in my opinion, that's always going to be with our players. So figuring out how to do that at the highest level and delegate and do that stuff has all been part of the evolution of last season. And again, I think we did a lot right. I think there was a lot of good things we did last year. We got to build upon those, make those even better, but certainly, look ourselves in the mirror, make some changes, and look myself in the mirror and identify areas where certainly I need to be better, but also, figuring out how to utilize this unbelievable staff that I have around me, figure out how to utilize them better. And I feel like I have. So I feel like we're clicking on all cylinders right now. It didn't feel like we were able to do that throughout the course of the season last year for a lot of different reasons. But, I feel like we're doing that right now, and we're prepared for when that adversity comes, because it's Big Ten basketball and you're going to see it. I think we're prepared to keep operating on all cylinders when that happens.
Kind of follows up on that, but obviously you talked about those big goals you guys have, and the program has not been able to reach those goals for several years. What are the biggest things you look at that you guys just need to do differently in order to get to those goals that you want to get to?
Yeah, it's been a long time in this program, dating back to, it's been over a decade, right, since the program's been at that level. So again, it's really hard to sustain that level of success in today's landscape. There's a lot of factors that go into it. I understand that, but we set the bar at the highest level here. That's just how I'm wired. I think that's how our guys are wired. And we got to continue, to strive for that every single day. I think we're doing everything behind the scenes to best position ourselves, to do that. And there's, again, a lot of factors that go into it. You can look at scheduling. We certainly scheduled hard this year, but I don't think maybe a little different than what it was last year. There's just different little things, and the way my mind works, in order to get there, you got to be willing to step back and look at every single area and be willing to really evaluate, how can we raise our level, even if it's just a little bit, in every single area. And that's what we've been focused on this off season. So I think by doing that, you're automatically starting a little further ahead than maybe where you were. And in this league, I think it's about getting momentum. Everybody's like, you're going to see different Big Ten schedules. Everybody's schedule is hard in the Big Ten. Like every schedule. Every Big Ten schedule is hard. And we, I think, have 4, 3 games in 7 days stretches this year. And it's all hard. Home, road. Another way to get back to that is, we got to protect our home court better. There were multiple games last year that we should have closed out that we didn't. And we've certainly gone back, watched those multiple times, dissected all that stuff. But I'm appreciative of Ross and his leadership and the investment that they put into our program since last season. There's some real improvements happening in the shop. And yeah, we got our schedules teed up that if we can really get this thing rolling, we're going to have some unbelievable atmospheres down the stretch of the season. When you look at some of those games we have at, end of February and March, we get some momentum. I think all that stuff matters to helping us get a home court advantage to some degree. But new lights, new sound, new floor, a lot of new stuff happening. And, I'm just really appreciative of his leadership and kind of, leading the charge and helping with that stuff, because, you want to compete for Big Ten championships, and that you got to protect your home court too. It's certainly part of it.
Hey, Coach. Tyson Chapman, just how has his health been, and what role, if he's healthy, do you kind of foresee for him? It feels like he's a guy that could really help provide some minutes for you if he's healthy. Yeah,
his health is great. I think that's been, sometimes he's been so consistent from really last spring to now that I forget sometimes what he's gone through the last couple of years, because he's been in there, every day. And I think it's important to remember that he didn't have he's yet to have a true kind of freshman year. And, we experienced some of those maybe young player mistakes at times, but, for him, the biggest thing is he's gifted with the ball in his hands. He's gifted at catch and shoots, playing off others. He's just got to continue to get better with some of the physicality and the pace of the game, particularly on the other side. As that continues to get better, it just raises the potential of impact that he can have. But, again, I don't want to keep talking about last year, but an issue last year was our bench production. We were, again, one of the lowest teams in the conference at getting bench production. So I think our depth this year and the type of depth we have, again, fixes an issue from last year. And he certainly, I think, helps with that depth that we have, no question.
Tilly, feels like he could be a mismatch and draw the big man out off the perimeter and shoot a little bit, but at the other end, do you feel like he's going to be sturdy enough? The interior defense was a big problem for you guys last year. Do you feel like he's going to be a guy that can defend without fouling and what you need to do together in protecting the rim?
Well, you can ask Yvonne how hard it's been, to guard him, because he's getting to go against them the bulk of the minutes every day. But yeah, I think offensively his versatility, and I feel like we've almost unlocked another level, because he and I have spent a lot of time in the gym. I think he understands, clearly the expectation for him as far as, kind of what's aggressive look like in our system, and it is more threes than he's used to, and it is putting the ball on the ground more than he's used to. So you're going to see him scoring at multiple levels, and I think it really puts the defense in a bind. On the other side, we got to do some things, schematically to help protect him, certainly, and we're working on those every day. But he is big, he is strong, and I think we have multiple guys we can put in there to to combat other teams who have size as well and protect him from being in foul trouble.
Coach, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned scheduling earlier. It's not as easy as people think it is. How do you go, I've talked to different coaches about this, how do you go about scheduling a home game, non-conference?
Yeah, scheduling is nowhere near as easy as anybody thinks it is. That's putting it mildly. I think it's important to note, again, I worked for Thad Mata here when, we didn't leave Columbus, it felt like, until January, right? And I think those days are long gone. And so there's a couple factors that have gone into, I think, the change, and in particular, the non-conference schedule, right? That's what we're referencing. First things first, we're playing more Big Ten games than ever. So that's 2 additional high major home games that we didn't have, or one, I guess, trying to think of the last 116, yeah. At least one high major game that we had that we didn't have before, right? So that's another high quality of home. Then, you consider that for the past few years, you've been able to increase your NIL access for your team through scheduling. That's been another factor. And so you're seeing less and less teams schedule home and home games, which has impacted that schedule. We've tried, I promise you, it has not been for lack of effort. We have tried to schedule, aggressively as far as bringing in another high major into our gym. I think getting a home and home with a team like Notre Dame, who, I think if you ask anybody, is primed for a huge year this year, and the regional aspect of that and the history across all sports, right? Like I think that's a big time home game. And that weekend, with Jerry Lucas statue, Ohio State versus UCLA, us versus Notre, like that's a big time weekend for Buckeye fans. And the way that came together, I'm really proud of, because it was a lot of work. Moving forward, we want to continue to schedule a high major non-conference home game. We'll see with the added game what it looks like, year in, year out, and how the NIL rules continue to change. I guess no one really knows exactly how they're changing, but we got to kind of evaluate that. But make no mistake, we're trying every single year as best we can to bring in a high major team into our gym.
Talking about the margins being so great that you get into the tournament potentially, and I think you played 9 one-possession games last year, but 2 or 3 in a row in the middle of the year.
5.
5
It was 5 in a row, right? First time in 126th year history of Ohio State basketball, but who's keeping track?
Knowing that if a shot hit in different ways, drops or doesn't drop, you might have been in the tournament. What do you think you learned from that stretch of games last year?
Yeah, it's always a fine line of evaluating those type of situations, because we all know the games, the outcome of a game shouldn't come down to one play, but it's a results-driven business, and that tends to determine the result. I think it's very easy to sit there and we can reflect back and say, like, man, what if, and certainly there's an element. Someone told me, and I don't know, you can fact check, we were like one of the most unlucky teams in the country. I don't know how you determine that, but that didn't make me feel any better. So I think the way I approach that, right, is taking a deep dive and really going back and watching like the last 5-6 minutes. Figuring out certainly, okay, what could we have done differently to maybe put us in a little bit better situation at the game. A lot of times when you do that throughout the course of our season last year, we had some self-inflicted wounds with foul shooters. We didn't complete possessions with a rebound, or we struggled to execute out of a timeout. Like there were little things like that certainly could have upped our chances. But yeah, some teams made those, some teams didn't, and oftentimes the degree of difficulty of the shot was probably pretty close to being the same. That's basketball. I think it's one of the beauties of this game. So I go back even further when we evaluate those. How do we not, instead of being up 1 or down 1, how can we be up 3 or 4? How can and like, listen, we practice end of game situations all the time, and I just, because of the respect I have for this league, we did it all the time last year. And we'll continue to do it all the time because that's Big Ten basketball. So it's important to evaluate how we can do better leading into those end-of-game moments. And then, you're also learning your team as the season goes on, who's most comfortable in those situations. And I think we got a great feel for that right now. I mean, if you could watch practice yesterday and seen our end-of-game execution, it wasn't perfect, but for September, it was big time. And, we had some guys make some big-time shots. And then, because I'm wired the way I am, I'm sitting here thinking, wow, why the defense let that happen? So it's, when you're practicing, you're never happy because you got both sides of the ball to look at. But I think we certainly learned a lot going back and reflecting through that. I think our players who are returning learned a ton. Great experience. And there's really so much value in experience, and we got a lot of it last year.
On the schedule topic, I know it was big for you to have more home games on the weekends. Michigan home and home, so to speak. Looks like you got some of that. Just how excited are you to A, have those, and B, that your voice was heard?
Yeah, I think the one thing, to remember about last season is it was a first for everybody. And, we clearly were heard on, my complaints about our lack of home weekend games. I think we doubled them from 2 to 4, so I'd like more, but we'll take it, we'll take that. And then I just, as soon as kind of our schedule came out last year, I think because of my respect for the history of this program and that rivalry, it just was too important, I feel like, to not have that rivalry protected. And so I went to the Big Ten. They told me to go talk to Dusty. It wasn't a long conversation. It didn't take him long to say, yeah, I agree. And then we kind of had a collective front, and they got it done. So it's great for Ohio State fans. It's great for Team Up North fans. It's great for Big Ten. Those games are always, for all the reasons, they're always highly viewed games, and so I'm excited about those two things certainly. Thanks, Adam. Thanks. You can do a couple more if you need to get it. It's fine.
You mentioned like the uncertainty in Iowa, how does that impact your recruiting right now? What are you telling recruits 2026, 2027 when they ask you, what can I get, what can I do, when I get a
It's a really unique time right now in college basketball because we don't know exactly what we're dealing with next year. This is a really important planning time for the future, and we're doing it with limited information or so much uncertainty. It's not fair to us. It's not fair to recruits. It's not fair to recruits and their families and agents and all the parties, right, that are involved as you try to make these decisions. So I think there's certainly an element of trust that has to exist to be able to kind of get to some conclusion. And timelines have changed in recruiting. It's a different time now. And that's okay. But, the biggest thing for me is, we always want to be about getting the right guys in this program. That's why I'm so excited about this roster right now. We've done that. And recruiting, obviously, and we will always recruit high school players here. And that's an important part as we plan for next year. But it's hard right now. I mean, there's no other way around it. And that uncertainty, we feel it, they feel it. I think everybody involved feels it. So it's just really hard, and we need some stuff set in stone, some better guidance. I can just make me in charge for a day, and I think I could. No, I listen. I think there's a lot of effort really on all parties to come to some conclusions quickly. There's a lot of things out there kind of floating around about potentially what next year could look like. We just got to get some decisions made. So, whether it's the leadership team of coaches and collaboration with, the team of the NCAA, they put some things in place to get things done quicker than it used to be. It just a lot of times, I think our calendar doesn't align with football, and that impacts things as well. So it's moving in the right direction. It's just, it's not as fast as we would like, but I think it's faster than it's been. So there's progress being made. We just, just kind of taking it one day at a time.
raising the collective IQ of the team. How do you do that aside from just practice, and then how do you test it?
Yeah, well, I think you recruit for it. Experience is a huge factor, right? Like when you add 30 or 60 college games to a player's experience level, they're going to be a higher basketball IQ. That's a baseline. Then we tried to look at guys who have been in. I think because of the time frame we had to make decisions, we targeted specifically some guys who played in systems that reflect, certainly not identical, but reflect some of the things that we are trying to do, because I think that speeds up that transition process, and I think that plays a role. So the most important ingredient is experience, but we got guys who are students of the game, guys who watch a lot of film. We have guys who can play multiple positions. That helps. I think that's a sign of that as well. So it starts though with experience. I think when you look at the guys we brought in the portal, I mean, Brandon's got a ton of experience. Tilly's got a ton of experience. Gabe has a lot of experience. He's been in college for 2 years. We got a full year playing. So I think that was a starting point for us.
Even those games where the other team you shoot almost as they want to, they just slow it down and have to be more half more team. How do you feel like this group is going to handle that this year versus what you want?
Yeah. I think we don't fear playing in the half court. The way our offense is being built, we can play in the half court if a team slows us down to that point. But we don't have to stop, look over at the bench, call a set every time to do it. And I think that's the encouraging thing. That we can get to actions a little quicker because we have some interchangeable parts. Part of last year, we had to play a little bit slower, and I think we played faster than Ohio State played in a long time, but it was a little bit slower at times because we had to help us by calling sets. It was a little less about maybe what the defense was doing. It was more to help us, help script things for us, because we just weren't collectively at a high enough level to kind of react the whole thing. We're in a position, I think, that we can do that more. So even if a team can slow down our initial push, we can grind out a possession in the half court without calling a set. We'll still call sets because we'll call some quick hitters. We'll utilize some mismatches we can create with the versatile pieces we have. I think versatility plays a huge role in that. But I think this team, can withstand a lot of different schemes against it. It can withstand a lot of different coverages and attempts to either slow down or speed us up. I think we're built to see a lot of different stuff, but within that, we remaining true to who we are as a team.
Randy Noel, I don't know how much you talked about him, but what he brings and possibly defend a five, can he step out and shoot, just all the different things. It looks like a lot of things he can do.
Yes.
Yes to all that.
Yeah. I think, tons of experience, again, a lot of production in college, certainly, but every bit of 6'8", 245 pounds too, which is also, he would have been our biggest guy on last year's team, as far as rotation goes. So I've been really impressed with him. It's a big transition to go from really having the ball in your hands all the time, having that level of production, now moving to this level, going up a level, and then playing with, what is a collection of really good players. And there's a sacrifice involved in that. But to his credit, he's figured out how to play off others at a really high level. He's got great instincts on kind of when to cut and how to create shots with his movement off the ball. He's really good at going to the glass. You can post him, he can shoot it. Again, he can score at multiple levels. So I've been really impressed with Brandon so far. All right, guys. Thank you.
See you guys, some of you guys on
Next week.
Saturday.